The instant my stepmother rose to declare she was removing me from the inheritance, the attorney simply smiled, then opened a file marked, "If Veronica speaks first." He had left me a tool she never suspected existed, a provision, a code, and a scheduled meeting where the deceased still maintained flawless timing. This evening, my father's reputation, our family wealth, and her liberty would be determined in a dimly lit, wood-paneled chamber where every utterance leaves legal traces. My name is Nora Bennett, and I've watched for the past 15 years as my stepmother systematically erased me from my father's existence, one deliberate action at a time. Now, seated in attorney Daniel Whitaker's boardroom, I observed her execute the ultimate deletion. The recording equipment on the mahogany desk blinked crimson at regular intervals, documenting every statement as Veronica Voss stood from her leather seat. At 52, she still drew attention. Silver blonde locks arranged in an elegant chignon, Hermes scarf positioned precisely over her charcoal business suit. Behind her, positioned like a human barrier, sat her sister Margaret and two cousins I'd encountered precisely twice in 15 years. "Before we continue with the reading," Veronica declared, her tone carrying that rehearsed combination of sorrow and command, "I possess a document that overrides whatever version Daniel has arranged." The wall clock ticked. 3:47 p.m. 3 days since we'd laid Graham Bennett, my father, to rest in Redwood Heights Cemetery. 3 days since I'd stood at his gravesite, questioning whether the separation between us these past years had been my doing or something more intentional. She withdrew a manila folder, extracting documents with dramatic precision. A codicil to Graham's will, properly witnessed and notarized. He executed it 6 weeks ago. I experienced the familiar detachment spreading up my back, the same feeling that had shielded me through the memorial service, through the sympathies of business colleagues who appeared shocked to discover Graham Bennett even had a daughter. "The codicil is quite explicit," Veronica proceeded, addressing the chamber as if chairing a board session at Harborline Dynamics, where I'd risen to director of brand operations without ever revealing whose daughter I was. Given Nora's prolonged absence from Graham's existence, her deficiency of participation in his treatment during his sickness, and her inability to sustain meaningful interaction, Graham decided to redirect her allocation of the estate. Prolonged absence, deficiency of participation. The phrases hung in the climate-regulated atmosphere like indictments. I longed to inform her about the 73 unanswered calls, the birthday greetings that inexplicably never reached him, the Thanksgiving meals where my invitations somehow vanished, the hospital visits where I was informed he was resting, only to discover later he'd been requesting me. But I stayed quiet, examining Daniel Whitaker's demeanor. The 60-year-old lawyer sat with his fingers pressed together, gray eyes disclosing nothing behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He'd been my father's counsel for 3 decades, had prepared the incorporation documents for Bennett Development Group, had attended my mother's funeral when I was 7. "The modifications are comprehensive," Veronica stated, pushing the documents across the surface to Daniel. "The residence on Willow Crest, the corporation shares, the investment portfolios, all allocated for family members who exhibited authentic care and attendance." Family members, not me. Evidently, I was merely the troublesome reminder of Graham Bennett's first marriage, the daughter who resembled too closely the wife he'd lost to cancer. The living specter Veronica had devoted 15 years attempting to exorcise. Daniel received the documents, adjusting his spectacles as he reviewed the opening page. The boardroom became silent except for the rustle of turning sheets and the constant tick of the timepiece. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass, Redwood Heights extended below us, a metropolis built on established wealth and emerging technology, where Bennett Development Group had helped construct the skyline for 4 decades. "Interesting," Daniel murmured, a term that could signify anything or nothing. Veronica's cousins moved in their chairs, trading looks. Margaret positioned a supportive palm on Veronica's shoulder, a motion so practiced it might have been choreographed. They'd all dressed in the identical range of respectful grays and blacks, a coordinated display of mourning and avarice. I reflected on the last genuine conversation I'd had with my father, 2 years prior, before his diagnosis, before the barriers Veronica constructed became impenetrable. We'd met for coffee secretly, he'd insisted, though I hadn't comprehended why then. He'd appeared exhausted, older than his 68 years, and he'd pressed an envelope into my palms. "Give this to Tom Hale," he'd said. "Tell him to secure it for you until the moment arrives." "Dad, what?" "Just promise me, Nora. Promise you'll remember." I'd promised. The envelope still remained in Tom's vault, unopened, awaiting a moment I couldn't define until now. "Ms. Bennet," Daniel's voice returned me to the present. "Are you conscious of the contents of this codicil?" "I can speculate," I said, my tone steadier than my heartbeat. "I'm being disinherited." "Redirection of assets," Veronica amended, as if terminology could diminish the impact. Graham desired his legacy to benefit those who genuinely valued him. The recording equipment blinked continuously, capturing every word, every silence, every calculation reflected in the polished surface. I could perceive myself, 32 years old, my father's dark eyes and my mother's angular features, wearing the identical black sheath dress I'd worn to both their funerals. Daniel set the documents aside and opened his leather case. "Well then," he said, fingers hovering over his laptop keys, "this certainly alters things." For the first instant since entering the chamber, he smiled, a subtle curve of lips that Veronica, absorbed in her moment of victory, failed to detect. But I saw it, and in that instant I grasped why my father had instructed me to trust Daniel Whitaker, why he'd smiled that identical knowing smile when handing me that envelope 2 years earlier. The moment had arrived. The residence on Willow Crest had been my complete universe until I was 7. After Mom died, it transformed into a monument, her photographs gradually vanishing from shelves and surfaces, her garden redesigned into something geometric and sterile, her piano relocated to the cellar and eventually sold. Veronica appeared 18 months following the funeral. Dad introduced her at a corporate gala, this refined marketing professional who laughed at all the appropriate moments and retained everyone's names. She relocated in 6 months afterward, bringing with her an interior designer and a mission to modernize our residence. I was 9 when I discovered Mom's wedding porcelain in containers marked for charity. 10 when her art workshop became Veronica's home office. 11 when the family portraits in the corridor were substituted with abstract pieces that better complemented the environment. But it wasn't simply the residence that transformed. It was the deliberately orchestrated separation that expanded between Dad and me. So incremental I didn't recognize it as tactics until years afterward. Graham's extremely occupied with the Singapore venture, Veronica would clarify when I phoned. "He's in conferences all day. Your father has a meal with investors this evening, when I'd request to visit, perhaps next weekend." Next weekend would bring another justification, another obligation, another obstacle. School functions went unattended. Birthday meals were postponed, then overlooked. When I graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern, Dad sent a congratulations card, store purchased, with Veronica's penmanship. The summer before my final year at university, I'd driven home unannounced, resolved to penetrate whatever barrier had formed between us. I discovered them hosting a pool gathering, Veronica's business connections, her relatives, couples from the country club. Dad was at the barbecue, laughing at something Margaret's husband mentioned, appearing relaxed and engaged in a manner I hadn't witnessed in years. "Nora." He'd seemed genuinely startled. Then something else. Guilty, troubled. "Sweetheart, we weren't anticipating you." Veronica materialized at his side within seconds. "How wonderful, though you should have telephoned. We would have arranged your room." My room had been converted to a guest quarters, neutral tones, hotel-style furnishings, no indication of the adolescent girl who'd once resided there. They'd placed me in the pool house, Veronica clarifying that all the bedrooms were filled by Graham's important guests. That evening, I'd overheard her in the kitchen with Margaret. She appears when it's convenient for her, anticipating everything to revolve around her timetable. Graham's finally constructing the existence he deserves. The existence he deserves, as if the existence that included me had been some form of punishment. The patterns became clearer as years progressed. Calls I placed that Dad never seemed to receive, emails that went unanswered, later explained as technical complications, holiday invitations that Veronica forgot to relay. She'd constructed a fortress around my father, brick by subtle brick, until I appeared to be the negligent daughter who'd abandoned him. "Have you attempted being more understanding?" Well-meaning relatives would inquire at the few family gatherings I still attended. "Veronica mentions you rarely visit." How could I clarify that my visits were deflected, my calls filtered, my attempts at connection processed through Veronica's careful management? That scheduling a simple lunch with my father necessitated navigating her assistant, her calendar, her authorization? The worst aspect was the uncertainty she cultivated in me. Perhaps I hadn't tried sufficiently. Perhaps I was being selfish, expecting him to make time. Perhaps the separation was my fault, the cost of pursuing my own profession, of not being the daughter who remained close to home and followed Veronica's rules. If Veronica challenges, everything becomes public. And not merely public. Copies are sent to the IRS, the state prosecutor's office, the boards of every charitable organization she serves on. What did she do? I inquired, though a portion of me already understood. Begin with the minor things, rerouting his correspondence, screening his calls. Federal offenses, technically. Then there's the medication tampering, financial elder exploitation, document forgery. Gregory has proof of her meetings with Joseph Mercer. I recognized the name, a discredited accountant who'd been discovered embezzling from another development company. She was constructing a case to assume control of the corporation, Tom clarified, claiming Graham was mentally incapable. The meetings with Mercer were about manufacturing financial discrepancies she could uncover and utilize to enforce a conservatorship. The complete extent of my father's counter-strategy was overwhelming. He'd allowed Veronica to believe she was prevailing while constructing an elaborate snare around her. Every action she took had been recorded, every offense cataloged, every falsehood documented. Why didn't he simply divorce her? I asked. He attempted early on. She threatened to ruin you, claimed she had contacts at Harborline, could ensure you were blacklisted in the field. She demonstrated to him how effortlessly she could manipulate your professional standing. Tom's jaw clenched. Graham loved you beyond his own existence. He chose to shield you the only method he could. I stood, paced toward the window. Dawn was emerging over Redwood Heights, coloring the sky in tones of gray and amber. Somewhere beyond, Veronica was likely celebrating her triumph, strategizing how to liquidate my father's holdings. What do I do now? I asked. Visit the bank, retrieve the USB drive and the original trust records. Then we await Daniel to activate the trap. Tom joined me at the window. Your father composed one more thing, a letter to be read only if Veronica challenges. He termed it his ethical will, clarifying everything to the board, to the staff, to the community. He wanted them to understand who he truly was and who she truly was. I reflected on the recording apparatus in Daniel's boardroom, blinking crimson as Veronica displayed her fraudulent codicil about Daniel's smile as he stated, "This certainly alters things." My father had been deceased for less than a week, but his strategy was profoundly alive. He'd provided me 3 instruments, a pour-over Veronica didn't know existed, a trust she couldn't dispute without forfeiting everything, evidence that would annihilate her if she attempted. He loved you, Tom said gently. Never question that. Every action he made these last 3 years was about safeguarding you and guaranteeing you received justice. I touched the letter to my mouth, then folded it carefully. My father had executed a lengthy, agonizing game, sacrificing his own contentment to secure my future. Now it was my opportunity to witness it through. Tell Daniel I comprehend, I said. I'll be prepared when the moment arrives. Tom smiled, the first authentic smile I'd witnessed from him in years. Graham would be proud. You're very much his daughter. I was. And Veronica was about to discover precisely what that signified. The second meeting at Daniel Whitaker's office was arranged for 2 p.m., exactly 1 week following Veronica's theatrical performance. This time, I arrived early, observing from the reception area as her Mercedes entered the parking structure, followed by a black Lexus transporting her legal team. She'd brought Jeffrey Cole, her personal counsel, a man notorious for aggressive litigation and flexible morals. The sight of him validated what Daniel had anticipated. Veronica wasn't surrendering without a battle. In the boardroom, the identical recording apparatus blinked crimson on the mahogany desk. Daniel sat at the head, accompanied by 2 associates I hadn't encountered previously. I took my position across from Veronica, noting how she'd arranged her entourage. Cole on her right, Margaret on her left, cousins behind her like infantry. "Thank you all for attending," Daniel commenced, his tone professionally impartial. "As executor of Graham Bennett's estate, I need to address the codicil displayed last week." Cole leaned forward. "My client's stance is explicit. The codicil is legitimate and supersedes any prior arrangements." Daniel nodded deliberately, withdrawing a manila folder. "I've had our forensic document analyst examine the codicil. There are some intriguing findings." He pushed a report across the surface. I caught Veronica's micro-expression, a flash of uncertainty rapidly suppressed. "First," Daniel proceeded, "the signature date. According to this codicil, Graham executed it on March 15th. However, hospital documentation shows he was under general anesthesia that day for a procedure. Rather challenging to sign legal documents while unconscious." Cole's complexion reddened. "There must be a clerical mistake, perhaps. But there's also the issue of the notary seal." Daniel produced a magnified image. The notary public listed Sandra Williams. Her commission expired in January, 2 months before this was supposedly notarized. Veronica's composed mask started to fracture. "These are technicalities. There's more." Daniel was relentless, professional. "The codicil references the Bennett estate property at 42 Riverside Drive. Graham sold that property in 2019. Rather peculiar to bequeath something he no longer possessed." "Most intriguing," Daniel continued, extracting another document, "is the forensic examination of the paper and ink. The watermark on this paper? It's from a batch produced in April, after Graham's death." The chamber fell quiet. Cole shuffled through documents, seeking a defense that didn't exist. "But let's set aside these inconsistencies," Daniel said smoothly. "The genuine issue is that this codicil, even if it were authentic, would be irrelevant. Graham executed a new will on January 10th, properly witnessed by myself and 2 associates, video documented and filed with the court." He opened his laptop, fingers moving across the keyboard. "Before we proceed to the actual will reading, there's a scheduled item Graham insisted upon. He termed it his contingency protocol. If anyone displayed a competing claim to his estate, which Ms. Voss has done, we're instructed to play recording number 14. Veronica straightened. "This is absurd. Theatrical." Daniel clicked play. Veronica's voice flooded the chamber, crystal clear. "Jeffrey, I need you to draft something ironclad. If the old man doesn't sign it voluntarily, we'll need to be inventive." Cole's response: "Veronica, I have to advise." "I don't pay you for advisories." I pay you for outcomes. That little brat isn't receiving a penny of Graham's money. I've labored too hard, tolerated too much. Delete this call from your records." Daniel paused the recording. "There are 47 more files. Would you like me to proceed?" Margaret had turned pale. The cousins exchanged panicked glances. Cole was frantically texting someone. Those recordings were obtained unlawfully, Veronica managed, her voice strained. "Actually, they weren't," Daniel replied. "Graham recorded them himself in his own residence, during conversations where he was a participant, perfectly lawful in North Midlands. He was quite meticulous. 3 years of documentation." He withdrew another folder. "We also have email metadata demonstrating systematic interference with Nora's communications. Deleted voicemails, we have the carrier logs. Intercepted letters, we have postal service tracking. Calendar appointments mysteriously cancelled, we have the digital footprints. You can't prove. We have sworn affidavits from household personnel. Maria, the housekeeper, details being instructed to state Mr. Bennett was unavailable whenever Nora telephoned. James, the driver, confirms being told to report Nora's visits in advance so you could ensure Graham was indisposed. Should I continue?" I observed Veronica's world disintegrate in real time. Each revelation stripped away another layer of her meticulously constructed facade until only the truth remained. Ugly, grasping, exposed. "Furthermore," Daniel added almost gently, "we have records of your meetings with Joseph Mercer. Discussions about manufacturing financial irregularities to trigger a competency hearing. Graham knew about those too." Cole stood abruptly. "We need to caucus with our client." "Of course. But before you do, you should comprehend the complete situation." Daniel's expression was almost sympathetic. "Graham's actual will leave 30% of his estate to Ms. Voss, a generous provision considering the circumstances. However, it includes a comprehensive no-contest clause. Any legal challenge, any attempt to dispute or modify the will's provisions, and that 30% is forfeit." "That's coercion," Cole sputtered. "That's estate planning," Daniel corrected. "Perfectly lawful and quite common. Ms. Voss can accept her 30%, approximately $18 million, or she can challenge and receive nothing. Her choice. And if she challenges," I spoke for the first time, my voice steady, "every piece of evidence goes public. The recordings, the emails, the witness statements, all of it." Veronica's eyes met mine across the desk. For 15 years, she'd labored to erase me from my father's existence. Now I held the power to erase her from society. "You wouldn't," she said. "The scandal, that would damage the company. Graham's reputation." "My father's reputation will survive the truth," I replied. "Will yours?" Daniel cleared his throat. "There's one more thing. Graham maintained a separate fund, completely legal, properly taxed, that he used to hire Gregory Barnes, a private investigator. Mr. Barnes has compiled a comprehensive report on certain offshore accounts, questionable charity expenditures, and interesting tax positions. That report is currently sealed. It remains sealed if Ms. Voss accepts the will's provisions." The trap was complete. Every exit blocked, every contingency addressed. My father had devoted 3 years constructing this moment, and Veronica had walked directly into it. Cole whispered urgently in Veronica's ear. Margaret clutched her sister's hand. The cousins appeared as though they wanted to vanish. "I need time," Veronica said finally, her voice hollow. "Of course," Daniel agreed. "You have 72 hours to decide. Accept the will as drafted, or challenge it and trigger the contingencies. I should mention, the IRS has already expressed interest in Mr. Barnes's findings. We've held them off, but if litigation begins," he let the threat suspend in the atmosphere. As they gathered their belongings to depart, Veronica turned to me one final time. "He never loved you the way he loved me," she said, venom in every word. I smiled, my father's smile, the one that meant checkmate. No, he didn't. He loved me more. That's why he devoted 3 years protecting me from you. And that's why you've already lost. She swept from the chamber, her entourage trailing behind. Cole paused at the door, gave Daniel a look that communicated he knew precisely how severely they were defeated. When they were gone, Daniel allowed himself a small smile. Your father would have enjoyed that. He did enjoy it, I corrected, thinking of all the planning, all the preparation, all the love that had gone into this moment. Every move, every countermove. He saw it all approaching. The recording apparatus continued to blink, capturing the victory my father had orchestrated from beyond the grave. Veronica had 72 hours to decide, but we all knew what she would choose. $18 million in silence, or nothing and public destruction. For someone who devoted 15 years valuing money and status above all else, it wasn't truly a choice at all. Daniel cleared his throat. The If Veronica Speaks First protocol includes 147 audio files, 89 video recordings, 312 documented incidents, and corroborating evidence for each. If Miss Voss proceeds with any legal challenge, all of this becomes part of the public record. He turned his laptop toward Veronica. This is a preview of the press release Graham prepared. It includes links to a website containing all non-privileged evidence. The domain is already registered, the site built and ready. One click and it goes live. I read the headline over Veronica's shoulder. Bennett Development founder documents years of elder abuse. A final testament to truth. You're bluffing, Veronica said weakly. Graham Bennett never bluffed, Daniel replied. He prepared for every contingency, including this one. He withdrew a tablet displaying a timer counting down. The website is set to go live automatically in 71 hours and 43 minutes. I can stop it with a code I'll enter only when Ms. Voss signs acceptance of the will as drafted. This is extortion, Cole finally managed. This is consequence, I corrected. 15 years of consequences, delivered all at once. Margaret stood abruptly. Veronica, take the money. Take it and run. Shut up, Veronica snarled, but the fight was draining from her. She looked older suddenly, the careful polish fracturing to reveal something desperate beneath. 30% of Graham Bennett's estate is approximately $18 million, Daniel said. Enough for a comfortable existence, anywhere. The alternative is public humiliation, potential criminal charges, and financial devastation. As your attorney should have informed you, no contest clauses are strictly enforced in North Midlands. Cole found his voice. We need to examine everything, all the recordings, all the documentation. Of course. Daniel smiled. I've prepared copies. All 47 hours of audio, 16 hours of video, and roughly 3,000 pages of documentation. Should keep you occupied for the next 71 hours. He pushed a hard drive across the surface. Take your time, but remember, the clock is ticking. As Veronica reached for the drive with trembling hands, I saw the precise moment she understood. My father hadn't merely prepared for this, he'd orchestrated it. Every move she'd made, every scheme she'd hatched, had been anticipated and countered before she even conceived of it. He played me, she whispered. No, I said, speaking directly to her for the last time. You played yourself. He just made certain there would be consequences. Daniel stood, signaling the meeting's conclusion. 71 hours, Ms. Voss. The choice is yours. As they filed out, Veronica broken, Cole calculating, Margaret disgusted. I remained seated, staring at the frozen image of my father on the screen. He really thought of everything, I said softly. Everything and more, Daniel confirmed. There are contingencies for the contingencies. Graham Bennett was the most meticulous client I've ever had. The recording apparatus continued its steady blink, capturing the moment when Veronica Voss learned that my father's greatest trick wasn't staying silent all those years. It was letting her believe she'd won, right up until the moment she lost everything. Daniel lifted a leather portfolio from his briefcase, extracting documents with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. The boardroom had emptied of Veronica's entourage, leaving just the three of us, Daniel, myself, and an associate who'd remained silent throughout the confrontation. "Now," Daniel said, adjusting his spectacles, "let me read you what Graham actually intended." He opened the formal will, its pages crisp with official seals and notarizations. Last will and testament of Graham Marcus Bennett, executed January 10th, 2025, in the presence of 3 witnesses and video recorded for authentication. The language was precise, leaving no room for interpretation. "I direct that all assets, not specifically distributed below, shall pour over into the Bennett Legacy Trust, established on the same date as this will. The house at 17 Willow Crest," Daniel continued, "is specifically bequeathed to my daughter, Nora Elizabeth Bennett, along with all contents, free and clear of any liens or encumbrances." I felt my throat constrict. He'd kept Mom's portrait after all. Now the Bennett Legacy Trust. Daniel produced another document, thicker than the will. This is where Graham got creative. The trust holds 70% of Bennett Development Group shares, the commercial real estate portfolio, the investment accounts, and various other assets. Total value as of last appraisal, approximately $62 million. He turned to a marked page. "You, Nora, are the primary beneficiary of 70% of the trust assets. Veronica Voss receives 30%, subject to the following conditions." The no contest clause was a masterpiece of legal engineering. It didn't just threaten forfeiture. It created a web of consequences that would ensnare anyone who challenged it. "Any beneficiary who contests, disputes, or challenges this trust or its distributions forfeits their entire share," Daniel read. But Graham went further. "Upon such challenge, the forfeited share doesn't revert to the estate. It transfers immediately to the Bennett Foundation for Childhood Cancer Research, my mother's charity, the one she'd established before her death. Furthermore," Daniel continued, "any such challenge triggers the release of all documentation collected regarding the challenger's conduct during Graham Bennett's lifetime. This documentation shall be provided to relevant authorities, media outlets, and professional organizations." "He weaponized charity," I murmured, almost admiring the elegance. "There's more. The trust includes specific provisions about the evidence collected. Graham established what he called the Sunshine Protocol. If anyone challenges the trust, all evidence becomes public domain, available to journalists, prosecutors, anyone who wants it. But if the trust distributions are accepted, the evidence remains sealed forever." Daniel flipped to another section. Graham also included a fascinating provision about timing. Veronica's 30% vests over 5 years, but only if she maintains appropriate distance from trust operations and beneficiaries. Any attempt to contact you, interfere with Bennett development, or influence trust decisions results in immediate forfeiture. "He's controlling her from the grave," I said. "Protecting you from the grave," Daniel corrected. "Every provision is designed to ensure your safety and peace of mind." The associate finally spoke. "There's also the matter of the secondary evidence cache. Mr. Bennett established a separate documentation repository with instructions for release upon specific triggers, not just legal challenges, but any attempts at harassment, defamation, or interference with Ms. Bennett's life or career." Daniel nodded. "Gregory Barnes maintains copies of everything. He's been retained by the trust for ongoing monitoring. If Veronica tries anything, spreading rumors, influencing your professional contacts, even indirect harassment, Gregory activates the protocol." I studied the trust documents, seeing my father's strategic mind in every clause. He'd thought through scenarios I hadn't even imagined, created protections for threats that might not emerge for years. What about the company? I asked. 70% gives me control, but… Complete control, Daniel confirmed. Graham structured the share classifications carefully. Your 70% carries enhanced voting rights, effectively 85% of voting power. Veronica's shares are non-voting preferred stock. She gets dividends, but no say in operations. She'll hate that. She'll hate everything about this trust, but she'll take it because the alternative is catastrophic. Daniel withdrew another document. This is a summary of what Gregory Barnes compiled. Shall we review what Veronica is so desperate to keep hidden? The list was extensive. Documentary evidence of medication tampering, adjusting Graham's doses to increase confusion and dependence, financial transfers to offshore accounts totaling $2.3 million over 5 years, forged signatures on 17 documents, including charity pledges and property transfers, recorded conversations discussing plans to have Graham declared incompetent, evidence of bribing household staff and medical personnel, systematic interception and deletion of communications, meeting records with individuals later convicted of elder abuse and fraud. The FBI White-Collar Crime Division has expressed interest, the associate added. They're particularly intrigued by the interstate commerce aspects. Some of the diverted funds cross state lines. Graham documented everything, Daniel said. Credit card receipts, bank records, phone logs. He even wore a wire to his own dinner parties. 3 years of building an airtight case. Why didn't he use it while alive? I asked, though I suspected the answer. He explains that in his ethical will, the letter to be read only if Veronica contests. Daniel held up a sealed envelope. But I think you already know he was protecting you. Using this evidence would have meant a public battle, dragging you through courts and media. This way, Veronica has every incentive to disappear quietly. I thought about the 5-year vesting schedule, the geographic restrictions implied by appropriate distance. Where will she go? Graham anticipated that too. The trust will pay her distributions to any valid bank account anywhere in the world. He's essentially offering her exile with a golden parachute. $3.7 million per year for 5 years if she stays away and stays quiet. And if she doesn't, then Gregory Barnes has standing orders to release everything. The trust will pursue criminal charges, civil suits, and public exposure. Graham called it mutually assured destruction with a strong incentive for peace. Daniel closed the portfolio. There's one more thing. Graham left a personal message for you, to be delivered after Veronica makes her choice. He was very specific, only after she decides. I nodded, understanding even this final timing. Everything had to play out in sequence, each move triggering the next. The Bennett Development Board meets next month, Daniel noted. With your shares, you'll have full control. The interim CEO has been briefed and is prepared to transition leadership whenever you're ready. Ready? Was anyone ever ready to step into their father's shoes? But I thought about the company he'd built, the legacy he'd protected, the lengths he'd gone to ensure I could claim it safely. Veronica has 67 hours left, Daniel said, glancing at his watch. Based on the panicked calls from Jeffrey Cole's office, I suspect she'll make her decision much sooner. No legitimate attorney will advise her to challenge this trust. And then you begin. The house is yours immediately. We can arrange key transfer tomorrow. The company transitions at your pace. The trust ensures you have resources and protection. Your father made sure of that. As we gathered the documents, I felt the weight of what my father had done. He'd spent his final years as a prisoner in his own life, but he'd used that time to build an unbreakable fortress around my future. Every humiliation he'd endured, every isolation he'd suffered, had been transformed into another brick in the wall protecting me. He won, I said softly. Graham Bennett always played the long game, Daniel agreed, and he never lost when it really mattered. The recording apparatus clicked off, having captured the reading of a will that was less about distributing assets and more about delivering justice. Somewhere across town, Veronica was discovering that my father's greatest gift to me wasn't money or property. It was freedom from her influence, her manipulation, her very presence. He'd given me back the life she'd tried to steal, wrapped in legal provisions so tight she couldn't touch it without destroying herself. The trust was named perfectly the Bennett legacy. Not just wealth, but wisdom. Not just assets, but assurance. My father's final move in a game, 15 years in the making. Checkmate. Gregory Barnes looked exactly like what he was. Former FBI, now private investigator, with gray eyes that missed nothing and hands that never stopped moving, constantly organizing the evidence spread across Daniel's conference table. "Your father hired me 3 years ago," Gregory began, his voice carrying the measured cadence of someone used to testifying. "He said he needed everything documented, legally obtained, and bulletproof. I've handled elder abuse cases before, but nothing this methodical on either side." He opened a laptop, revealing a database that would have made the FBI proud. "Every piece of evidence is triple-backed, time-stamped, and verified. Let me show you what Veronica Voss doesn't want the world to see." The first file was a location tracking report. Ms. Voss's phone GPS, cross-referenced with deleted voicemail logs. "Look here, January 15th, 2:47 p.m. You left a voicemail for your father. At 2:51 p.m., Veronica's phone shows her location in Graham's home office. At 2:52 p.m., that voicemail was deleted from the system. Red dots on a map, each one a stolen message. 17 occasions over 6 months. She got sloppy," Gregory continued. "Didn't realize the phone company keeps deletion logs for 90 days. We subpoenaed them all." Next came the financial forensics. Joseph Mercer, disgraced accountant, served 18 months for embezzlement. Veronica met him 14 times between September and December. Always at the Riverside Motel, always paid cash for the room. He pulled up photographs. Veronica entering the motel, Mercer arriving minutes later. Timestamps clear in the corner. Their plan was sophisticated, create phantom invoices in Bennett Development System, make it look like Graham approved them, then claim mental deterioration when the irregularities surfaced. Classic setup for a competency hearing. "But Mercer kept copies," I said, reading the seized documents. "Criminals always do. Insurance against their partners." Gregory smiled grimly. When he was arrested in January, he rolled immediately. Full cooperation, documented everything. The evidence kept coming. Email headers showing forwarding rules Veronica had set up on Graham's account, routing his messages to her first, letting her screen everything. Security footage from the house showing her entering his office at night, accessing his computer. Bank records revealing transfers to an account in the Caymans. Small enough to avoid automatic reporting, but steady over years. "This is my favorite," Gregory said, pulling up an audio file. Graham started wearing a recording device to family dinners. "Listen to this." Veronica's voice, wine-slurred but clear. The old fool actually thinks Nora cares about him. "She hasn't visited in months because I make sure she can't. Every call blocked, every letter intercepted. By the time he dies, she'll look like the neglectful daughter who abandoned him. And Margaret, stop looking at me like that. You're getting your cut." Margaret's voice uncomfortable. "I just think." "Don't think. That's not what I pay you for." Daniel leaned forward. "That recording alone establishes conspiracy. Margaret's testimony in exchange for immunity would be devastating." Gregory moved to a thicker folder. "The medication manipulation was harder to prove until we found her supplier." He produced invoices from a Canadian pharmacy. She was ordering Graham's medications online. Same drugs but different dosages. The pills looked identical, but were significantly stronger. Classic elder abuse tactic: increase confusion and dependence. We have the housekeeper's testimony confirming Veronica personally managed all medications, the associate added. Never let anyone else near them. There's more, Gregory said, his expression darkening. She had Graham's will copied at a 24-hour print shop. Security footage shows her there at 2 a.m. with estate documents. She was practicing his signature. He showed blown-up comparisons. Graham's real signature versus increasingly accurate forgeries. But here's what will really destroy her, Gregory said, opening a final folder. The charity fraud. My stomach dropped. What charity fraud? The Bennett Foundation for Childhood Cancer Research. Your mother's charity. Gregory's voice gentled. Veronica was on the board, had signing authority. Over 5 years, she redirected almost $400,000 in donations. Small amounts disguised as administrative expenses, consulting fees, vendor payments, all to companies that trace back to her. She stole from my mother's charity. Every penny documented. The Foundation's audit trail is impeccable. Your father made sure of that after Veronica got involved. Gregory showed spreadsheets, canceled checks, wire transfer confirmations. This isn't just civil liability. This is federal wire fraud. Daniel cleared his throat. The U.S. Attorney's Office is very interested. Charity fraud, especially involving cancer research, tends to generate aggressive prosecution. I stared at the evidence, overwhelming in its scope and detail. Phone records, emails, financial transfers, recorded conversations, video surveillance, witness testimony. 3 years of my father constructing an airtight case while pretending to be a frail old man under her control. How, I asked, how did he manage all this while sick? Gregory smiled with genuine admiration. Graham Bennett was brilliant. He played helpless during the day, then worked with me at night. Had a secure phone she didn't know about, a laptop hidden in the garage, meetings disguised as medical appointments. Even when the cancer got bad, he never stopped gathering evidence. He wore a wire to his own anniversary party, Daniel added. Recorded Veronica telling her sister about the insurance policy she was building, the forged codicil. Gregory pulled up one final document. This is the crown jewel. Graham's journal, updated daily for 3 years. His contemporaneous record of everything. Dates, times, conversations, a state of mind. In his own handwriting, notarized weekly by Daniel. Any court would find it devastatingly credible. I picked up the journal, reading random entries. March 3rd. Veronica deleted 7 voicemails from Nora today. I heard them, first on my hidden phone. My daughter loves me. She's never stopped trying. May 18th. Overheard V telling Margaret that once I'm gone, she'll clean house at the company. She has a list of people to fire all my loyalists. December 1st. Nora came by. V sent her away, told her I was sleeping. I was at the window, saw my baby girl crying in her car. Soon, sweetheart. Daddy's almost done building your fortress. The journal blurred through my tears. Everything is admissible, Daniel said quietly. If Veronica challenges the will, this all becomes public record. The FBI gets copies, the IRS gets interested, the state attorney files charges. And if she doesn't challenge, then it stays sealed forever. Graham was offering her a choice. Take the money and run, or fight and be destroyed. Gregory began packing the evidence. Your father gave me one last instruction. If Veronica accepts the deal, I'm to maintain surveillance for 5 years. Any attempt to contact you triggers immediate release of everything. He thought of everything, I said. Not everything, Gregory corrected. He couldn't protect you from the pain of losing him, but he made sure she could never hurt you again. After they left, I sat alone with the containers of evidence. 62 hours remained on Veronica's clock, but we all knew her decision. The evidence was too damning the consequences too severe. My father had won from his deathbed, orchestrating perfect justice through patience, documentation, and the inexorable power of truth. The call came at 10 a.m. the next morning. Jeffrey Cole, speaking in clipped tones. "My client wishes to discuss terms," he said. "The terms are non-negotiable," Daniel replied. 30%, the no contest clause, and complete separation from Ms. Bennett and Bennett Development Group. Ms. Voss has a counterproposal. 2 hours later, we were back in the boardroom. Veronica looked like she'd aged 5 years overnight. Her composure cracked, designer suit wrinkled, hands trembling. 40%, she said without greeting, and I keep the house on Willow Crest. No, I said simply. That house was my mother's. You were a guest who overstayed her welcome. 35% and one of the commercial properties. 30%, Daniel repeated, as specified in the trust. No amendments, no negotiations. This is robbery, Margaret interjected. 15 years of elder abuse, I corrected. Would you prefer we discuss the recordings where you acknowledge being paid for your cooperation? Margaret fell silent. The evidence was obtained through questionable means, Cole tried. Everything was legally obtained, Daniel interrupted. Would you like to test it in court? I could go to the media myself, Veronica said desperately. Tell them how I was manipulated by a sick old man. Who would believe you? I asked. The woman caught on tape discussing medication tampering, stealing from a cancer charity. Daniel pulled out a tablet. Gregory Barnes has prepared a comprehensive package for the media. The headline reads, Trophy Wife's Systematic Abuse of Dying Millionaire, a 3-year investigation. You wouldn't. The scandal would hurt the company. Bennett Development will survive the truth about you, I said. In fact, it might actually improve our reputation. 53 hours remain, Daniel noted. Accept the 30% and leave with some dignity, or fight and lose everything. Cole whispered urgently to Veronica. Finally, he straightened. We need assurances. How do we know the evidence won't be released anyway? The trust agreement includes strict confidentiality provisions, Daniel said. All evidence remains sealed as long as Ms. Voss complies. What constitutes compliance? Simple. Take the money. Stay away from Ms. Bennett. No contact, no interference. Geographic restriction of 500 miles from North Midlands for 2 years. 100 miles thereafter. That's exile, Veronica spat. That's freedom from prosecution, I corrected. 3.7 million per year for 5 years. I want it all at once. Impossible. The vesting schedule is ironclad. Violate the terms, forfeit the remainder. The wall clock ticked loudly, each second bringing Veronica closer to a decision she desperately wanted to avoid. What about my reputation? She asked. Tell them whatever you want, I said. I don't care as long as you're gone. You're enjoying this? No, I said. I'm ending 15 years of manipulation. It ends now. Ms. Voss must vacate Willow Crest within 7 days, Daniel added. Personal belongings only. 7 days. Margaret protested. 7 days or forfeiture, Daniel said firmly. Veronica calculated, watching her options shrink. I want guaranteed safe passage. No criminal charges if I comply. The trust can't guarantee what prosecutors might do independently, Daniel said carefully. However, if you comply, the evidence remains sealed. Without evidence, no case. I need to think. 52 hours, Daniel reminded her. Veronica stood abruptly. I want to see him. Graham. I want to visit his grave. I studied her face. Why? Because I did love him in my way, before it all became about money and control. You can visit before you leave town, I conceded. Once. Supervised. Gregory Barnes will accompany you. She nodded. Daniel outlined the process. Sign the acceptance documents, provide banking information, execute non-disclosure agreements, surrender all keys and access codes. Complete departure within 7 days. Then you disappear, I added. Permanently. Cole gathered his papers. We'll provide an answer within 48 hours. 24, Daniel countered. As they prepared to leave, Veronica turned back. He never mentioned you without smiling, even when I convinced him you'd abandoned him. Deep down, he never believed it. I know, I said. That's why he spent 3 years protecting me. Every document, every recording, it was all for me. His real legacy. When they were gone, Daniel smiled. She'll take it. No competent attorney would advise otherwise. 24 hours until Veronica decided between wealth and warfare. But we all knew her choice. Greed had driven every decision for 15 years. Now greed would drive her away. The acceptance came 18 hours later. Cole's voice through the speakerphone carried defeat underneath professional neutrality. Ms. Voss accepts the terms as specified, he said. Already done, Daniel replied. Can you be here at 2 p.m.? Yes. The final meeting had the atmosphere of a funeral. Veronica entered, flanked by Cole and Margaret, her designer armor intact but her eyes hollow. Daniel had arranged everything with surgical precision. 3 copies of each document, color-coded tabs, and notary waiting. The recording apparatus blinked crimson. Before we proceed, Daniel said, there's one additional item per Graham's instructions. He slid an envelope across the surface. Veronica's name in my father's handwriting. She stared at it. What is this? Graham gave it to me 3 months ago, only to be delivered if you accepted without litigation. Veronica's hands shook as she read. I watched her face change, surprise, anger, then regret. Read it aloud, I said. It's private. Nothing between you and my father is private anymore. Read it. She cleared her throat. Veronica, if you're reading this, you've chosen wisdom over war. I won't pretend to forgive what you've done. The isolation from Nora, the theft from her mother's charity, the medications. But I understand why. You were afraid of being poor again, afraid of losing control. The trust provides for you generously, more than you deserve, but less than you wanted. I documented everything to ensure you could never hurt anyone else the way you hurt us. My investigators will watch you for the rest of your life. Any attempt to remarry into wealth will trigger release of everything. You wanted my money, you've got some. You wanted my life, you stole years. But you never got what mattered. My love for my daughter, my memories of my first wife, my integrity. These were never yours to take. Leave. Don't look back. And pray my daughter is more merciful than I would have been. The letter fluttered to the table. Veronica's composure cracked completely. He knew, she whispered. All those years he knew everything. Sign the documents, Daniel said quietly. What followed was methodical. Veronica's signature on acceptance forms, non-disclosure agreements, transfer authorizations. Each document stamped, witnessed. The systematic dismantling of 15 years, reduced to ink on paper. The house keys, Daniel prompted. Veronica removed them from her purse, fingers lingering before sliding them across. The alarm code is being changed as we speak, Daniel said. All access codes were updated this morning. Movers arrive tomorrow at 9 a.m. Personal clothing. Jewelry gifted personally, toiletries. Nothing purchased with Bennett funds. Each restriction stripped away the life she'd built on my father's destruction. She had millions promised, but nothing left of the world she'd controlled. One more thing, Daniel said, producing a final envelope. Veronica tore it open. As she read, her face went white. No, she breathed. What did he write? I asked. With trembling hands, she read. Final terms non-negotiable. You'll provide a full written confession of all crimes committed during our marriage. This confession will be sealed with the other evidence. released only if you violate the trust terms. You have 1 hour to decide. That's self-incrimination, Cole protested. It's sealed unless she violates the terms, Daniel pointed out. If she honors the agreement, it never sees light. And if she doesn't provide it, the acceptance is void, and we proceed to litigation with all evidence released immediately. The chamber fell silent. Veronica sat frozen, calculating. A written confession would be damning if released, but refusing meant certain destruction now. My father had given her one final choice: confess in secret or be destroyed in public. Either way, he'd won. He thought of everything, she whispered again. 1 hour, Daniel said, checking his watch. I have a legal pad and pen ready. What followed was excruciating. Veronica, prompted by Daniel's questions, wrote out a detailed confession. The medication tampering, the diverted charity funds, the isolation tactics. Each crime catalogued in her own handwriting, her own words. Initial each page, Daniel instructed. Full signature on the last page. When it was done, Veronica looked broken. 57 years old, wealthy by any standard, but utterly defeated. The confession went into a sealed envelope, added to the boxes of evidence that would shadow her forever. Is there anything else? She asked, voice barely audible. I stood, looking down at the woman who'd stolen 15 years from my father and me. Yes, get out of my city. Today. Take Margaret. Take your cousins. Take whoever else was feeding off my father's life. Leave and never come back. She rose unsteadily, Cole supporting her elbow. At the door, she turned back one last time. What if I'd refused everything, fought you with everything I had? Then you'd have lost everything you have, I answered. My father knew you'd choose money over principle. You always did. They left in silence. Margaret cast one last venomous look, but even she seemed subdued by the completeness of their defeat. When they were gone, Daniel opened his desk drawer and pulled out a bottle of champagne. Graham left this, he said, with instructions to open it when Veronica signed. The cork popped, echoing in the empty conference room. We drank in silence, toasting a man who'd orchestrated his own justice from beyond the grave. There's still the matter of her visiting his grave, Daniel reminded me. Let her, I decided. Gregory will be there. Let her say goodbye to the man she thought she controlled. I gathered my copies of the signed documents, deeds to the house, corporate transfer papers, trust acceptances. Tomorrow, I would walk into my childhood home for the first time in years. Next month, I would take my father's seat at Bennett Development. But tonight, I would remember him, not the isolated man Veronica had created, but the strategist who'd spent 3 years building my freedom. The father who'd loved me enough to appear weak while being stronger than anyone imagined. He really won, I said to Daniel. He agreed. Graham Bennett's final development project. Your future, free and clear. The recording device clicked off, having captured the end of Veronica's reign. Somewhere across town, she was packing what little she could claim, preparing for exile with a fortune that would feel like poverty compared to what she'd lost. My father's last letter to her had been perfectly crafted, forcing honesty from someone who'd lived in lies, creating a sword that would hang over her forever. She'd entered our lives with manipulation and greed. She was leaving with money and fear, and that, my father would have said, was justice. The transfer was complete. I sat in Daniel's office one last time, holding the final piece of my father's plan, a sealed letter marked, "For Nora, after everything is finished." He gave me this 2 weeks before he died, Daniel said softly. His hands were shaking, but he insisted on writing it himself. I opened it carefully, seeing his handwriting, less steady than his earlier letters, but still unmistakably his. My dearest Nora, if you're reading this, then the plan worked. Veronica has taken her money and fled. The house is yours again, and the company awaits your leadership. But more importantly, you know the truth. I never stopped loving you. Not for a single moment. I need you to understand why I chose this path. A direct confrontation would have meant lawyers, courts, public battles that could have lasted years. She would have dragged your name through mud, used her connections to damage your career, turned our private pain into public spectacle. I couldn't let that happen. Instead, I became what she expected, a weak old man she could control. I let her believe she'd won while I built your fortress, brick by brick. Every humiliation I endured, every isolation I accepted was another piece of evidence, another protection for your future. The house on Willow Crest belongs to you now. Your mother's portrait is in storage unit 47B. I saved everything Veronica tried to discard. Her piano is there too, waiting to come home. Make that house alive again, filled with the warmth she brought to it. The company needs you. I've kept good people in key positions, waiting for real leadership. Trust Sarah Chun in operations, Marcus Wade in finance. They stayed loyal despite Veronica's attempts to force them out. But beyond property and business, I want you to have what Veronica tried to steal: peace. The investigations will continue, monitoring her, ensuring she never returns to hurt you. Live your life free from looking over your shoulder. I have one last confession. The cancer gave me clarity. Strange as that sounds, it showed me what mattered. Not the empire I built or the wealth I accumulated, but the daughter I raised and the love that survived despite everything. Be happy, sweetheart. Be free. Be everything Veronica tried to prevent you from becoming. And know that somewhere beyond all this, your mother and I are watching, proud of the woman you've become. All my love, always. P.S. Check the basement workshop. I left one more surprise. The tears came then. 15 years of grief and anger and love pouring out in Daniel's quiet office. He handed me tissues, waited patiently while I composed myself. The workshop. I asked when I could speak. I don't know, Daniel admitted. Graham had many secrets, even from me. An hour later, I stood in my childhood home for the first time since that disastrous pool party. The house felt different, not just empty of Veronica's presence, but waiting, like it had been holding its breath. The basement workshop had been my father's sanctuary, where he'd built doll houses for me as a child, later teaching me about construction and design. Veronica had declared it off-limits years ago, citing insurance concerns. I descended the stairs, found the light switch. The workshop was exactly as I remembered. Tools hung precisely, blueprints cabinet against the wall, the smell of sawdust and possibility. On the workbench sat a model house, intricate and perfect. Not just any house. Our house, the Willow Crest property, rendered in miniature. Every detail exact, from the wraparound porch to the oak tree in the backyard. A note was attached. Started this when you were 7, after Mom died. Kept adding to it over the years. Your treehouse, the garden expansion, the studio addition we planned but never built. Thought someday we'd finish it together. Maybe now we can, in a different way. Build the life that was interrupted. Make it yours. I lifted the model carefully, seeing the thousands of hours worked into it. Hidden in the tiny rooms were more surprises. Furniture that matched pieces from my childhood. A microscopic piano in the living room. Family photos rendered in impossible detail. In the model's version of the workshop sat an even tinier model house. Infinity reflected in miniature. Dreams within dreams. I carried it upstairs, placed it on the mantel where Veronica's abstract art had held court. Tomorrow, movers would bring my mother's things home. Next week, I'd meet with the Bennett Development Board. Next month, I'd start the studio addition my father and I had dreamed about. But tonight, I walked through empty rooms full of possibility. In the kitchen, I found one wine glass, my mother's favorite crystal, hidden in the back of a cabinet. I poured wine, raised it to the empty air. To Graham Bennett, I said aloud, who lost every battle to win the war. My phone buzzed. A text from Gregory Barnes. Subject departed north, Midlands, via interstate. Tracking active. No issues to report. Veronica was gone. Her exile began now. Funded generously but absolute. She'd have her millions, her distance. Her life built on my father's final mercy. And hanging over her forever, boxes of evidence, a written confession, the knowledge that one violation meant total destruction. I thought about her visiting his grave that morning, Gregory standing watch. What had she said to the stone that marked Graham Bennett? What final words passed between controller and controlled? Manipulator and mastermind? It didn't matter. She was gone and I was here. I climbed to my old room, found it stripped of personality but structurally unchanged. The window still looked out on the oak tree. The reading nook still caught afternoon light. Ghosts of posters remained on walls. Shadows of the girl who'd lived here before Veronica's arrival. From here, I could see the city lights, North Midlands spread below like a circuit board. Somewhere among those lights was Bennett Development, waiting for leadership. Somewhere was my apartment, soon to be vacated. Somewhere was the future my father had built with patience and pain. The will had been read. The trust was secure. The evidence was sealed. Veronica had her money and her banishment. The house was mine. The company was mine. The truth was mine. My father's final development project was complete. I pulled out my phone, opened my email, began typing. To Sarah Chen, Marcus Wade, Bennett Development Senior Staff. Subject, new leadership. This is Nora Bennett. I'll be taking my position as majority shareholder and CEO effective Monday. Staff meeting at 9 a.m. We have work to do. Send. Then another. To Daniel Whitaker. Subject, thank you. For everything. For keeping his secrets, for springing his trap, for helping him protect me even when I didn't know I needed protecting. Dad chose his allies well. Send. One more. To Tom Hale. Subject, dinner. I'm home. Really home. Willow Crest, where it all started. Bring wine and stories about Dad. I want to hear everything Veronica kept from me. Send. The house settled around me. Walls exhaling years of tension. Tomorrow would bring challenges, running a company, reclaiming a life, building the future my father had preserved. But tonight was for gratitude and grief, for understanding the full scope of a love that had seemed absent but was working always in shadow. Graham Bennett had spent 3 years dying to give me life. The least I could do was live it well. I raised the crystal glass once more, this time to the model house on the mantel. Dreams in miniature, waiting to be built full scale. Welcome home, Dad, I whispered. We won.